I thought today would be a good chance with World Polio Day coming up on October 24 to share a little bit of my life experience as a polio victim and survivor, and also take a look at Rotary's campaign to eradicate polio worldwide and take a look at where we are as Rotarians in that journey. I haven't talked a lot about my polio experiences throughout my life, maybe with one of those desires that if I didn't talk about it or think too much about it, it wouldn't affect me. But I'm finding now that while I thought I was finished with polio, polio wasn't finished with me. So 4 years ago, how about the arrow over here? Yeah. We're having trouble advancing the slide. 4 years ago, I was hiking around the Isle of Man, northeast of Dublin, with a friend of mine. And as you can see, that was a fairly easy trail on the left. And here I am 4 years later, wearing a brace on my left leg because of increasing weakness that started showing up about 1.5 years ago. So now I find that I need the brace to avoid falling on my face. No rhyme intended. And it's brought home to me how post-polio syndrome can affect us as polio victims. And it's been a lot of years. Let's take a look real quick at what polio is, because there could very well be some in the room that aren't all that familiar with it, since we basically have had no cases, with one exception I'll talk about in a few minutes. In the US since 1979, most of us are not familiar with it unless we've had family members affected by polio or crippling. So it's a highly contagious disease, crippling disease. It's caused by a polio virus that attacks our nervous systems and then weakens the muscles. And it's especially onerous for children under 5. They're the ones most likely to contract it because of their age and lack of immunity. So we have symptoms very much like the flu, but in history, there are historical references even to going back to the tombs in Egypt in ancient times, polio rulers that had polio and were somewhat paralyzed by it. So been around a long time. And I remember one of the things I remember as a kid when I had polio was that there was great fear that the polio virus was spread through the swimming pools. And so the swimming pools were closed summer after summer. And now we've been getting a taste of that with COVID. The number paralyzed is really a very, very small number. Excuse me. And there is no known cure. The way to prevent polio is to prevent it with vaccinations. And the ideal WHO recommended spread is somewhere in the 90 to 95% range of vaccinations. So a moment of reminiscence. I think I'm 2 or 3 years old on that picture on the left, happy little guy. And then a 4th grade picture on the right. One of the primary side effects that I had with polio that affected my life most as a kid, for sure, was that it weakened the muscles in my right eye. And as a result, I was cross-eyed very badly for many years. And you can see in the 4th grade picture, the right eye is looking one direction, the left eye is looking another direction. And as a result of that weakness, I had double vision for really all my life up until 3 or 4 years ago, and it was largely corrected. But but the double vision was the big thing that affected me as a kid. I had polio in 1949, and there were about 350,000 cases that year in the US. So the hospitals, like COVID, excuse me again, a tickle in my throat this morning. The hospitals were running over just like they have been in COVID in the last couple of years. The hallways were filled. I remember that. I grew up in a very small town in Northwest Arkansas, just south of Bentonville, the famous home of Walmart. And my parents took me to a hospital in Tulsa. And I do remember the hallways were filled. As a first grader, I guess we don't remember a lot of things, but I do remember that. And they sent me home for home care, and my mother put me through a regimen of hot baths, massage, stretching, a lot of stretching exercises, and more hot baths. I think I was probably the cleanest kid in Northwest Arkansas during those times, but I had a lot of baths. I used to have my grade card from that first year, and I missed about the first quarter of the first grade, but fortunately I was able to catch up and go ahead and pass the first grade and move on. The one thing that I remember most about having polio at that time was the intense pain that I had in the backs of my legs. As the muscles were trying to draw up, it seemed like they were trying to cripple me. And I think, in fact, they were. That was the virus and the effect of working on my muscles. But fortunately, I was not crippled. I always, after having polio, I was never that little chubby-faced kid again. I was always skinny. I was not very strong, especially in my legs. And I find that they are weakening more with the post-polio syndrome. But that is one of the characteristics of the disease. I think I weighed about 130 pounds when I graduated from high school, so I didn't play lineman on the football team for sure. In fact, I didn't even try out for the football team. But I did love to play baseball, and I was a pretty good little league pitcher because I think the kids didn't know where the ball was going to go because they couldn't tell where I was looking because of my eyesight. It was so bad. But I was not a good batter. It's very hard to hit a ball, hit two balls at the same time, and that's what I would see. Okay, let's look at the next slide there. So this is what hospitals looked like in the late 40s, because through the 40s, there was just so much polio, and the hospitals were filled with iron lungs. And I know if you look very carefully, you can see, like the little girl on the lower left, that girl's not very old, and you can see some of the others look like they're children. I also love see the man standing in the upper left corner there. He's got on his white shirt and his bow tie. I guess he was a nurse or an attendant, but dressed a little better back in those days, I guess, as well. But anyway, the one thing that really had an impact on my life with double vision was I was drafted in 1966 to go into the military service, and the doctors examined me and said they didn't think they could take me into the Army because of my double vision. And I could have assured them of that, because I wouldn't have known where to aim the rifle if they had given me one, probably. As the double vision, pretty well I was able to get eliminated when I had cataract surgery about 4 years ago. And the doctor was able to put in lens implants and pretty well correct it. I'm curious as to if there, and I can't see all of you at this point, I don't have the full screen, but if there are any people in the club there that have family members, grandparents, parents that may have been affected with polio, or you've had some experience with polio, Mary Ann, can you see the group? Is anybody reacting on that?
We've got about 5 or 6 hands raised here, Jerry.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Well, as I've studied on this and worked on these programs, I'm amazed at how many people have been affected by polio. And you just, of course, you don't know it, but there are many people that are still suffering with post-polio syndrome if they've lived to the ripe old age of 79 like me. So a profound impact on our folks. Well, moving ahead, advancing on to the mid 50s, like the COVID pandemic, there was a great push to develop the vaccines, and most of you know the stories about the Sabin and Salk polio vaccines being developed, and in 1955, they started the inoculations with the Salk vaccine. So you can see these little guys, they're lining up and they're thinking this is quite a bit of fun. They're going to get vaccinated. And then there's a little bit of apprehension, quite a bit of curiosity on the faces of the kids in this picture. And then some just didn't have much fun at all getting a shot. But they lined up, and as a result of the vaccination program throughout the country, we pretty much eliminated polio in the US by 1979. And that's just what, 24, 25 years after the development of the vaccines. Really amazing. And of course, now most everybody gets their vaccinations when they're babies, infants between 2 and 3 years old. They finish their shots and they are protected. So let's fast forward to 1979 then, and look at, switch gears here and look at how Rotarians got involved. After eliminating polio in the US, they must have felt pretty good about doing it throughout the world. And so Rotarians stepped up to lead a drive to vaccinate 6 million Filipino children over a period of 4 or 5 years. And they were able to do that, but of course that didn't stop a worldwide pandemic. So in 1985, at the convention that was held in Kansas City, the Rotary International Convention, Rotarians voted to raise $120 million. And by golly, we're going to go out and use that in the world and stop polio. Well, you know, Rotarians, they are overachievers, and they raised more than $250 million. And that caught the attention of a few folks in the international health agencies. And in 1988, the World Health Assembly announced the effort, a unified effort, and it was called the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. GPEI is a lot easier to say. But it involved these international organizations that are shown on the screen. And then later on, as you know, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has stepped up and has been matching our donations 2 for 1, and that has been a huge help in the fight. So we started in 1985 with Polio Plus, and here we are almost 40 years later and still battling the disease. And look what happened this year. U.S. declared victory over polio, but now here it is again. When there was a paralytic case reported in upstate New York, an area north of New York City, a Jewish Orthodox community that did not believe in vaccinations, and they had a vaccination rate of about 60%. In one zip code, they had or one area code, they had a vaccination rate of under 40%. And so that's how the virus got back into the country and paralyzed a young man. In addition to that, the other things that have happened, the polio virus has been detected in the sewage in London. Malawi and Mozambique have both been reporting cases, and Africa, you may recall, was declared polio-free several years ago. So it's a little frightening to see that happening. When these cases popped up, this is 2 or 3 comments that were made. I love the one in the middle that seems to sum it all up. We were under the impression that it was pretty much eradicated, but obviously this shows that it's not done. Mike McGovern is the chair of the Polio Plus Committee, and he said this shows why we have to stay the course, and we do. So today the numbers, if you read the Rotary magazine or other publications or get some blogs from Rotary, you probably know this already. 19 cases so far in Pakistan this year, 2 in Afghanistan. You'll see the numbers, well, the number in Pakistan, certainly only 1 in 2021, but I think we had a period of a year and a half or so where people weren't moving and traveling around much, and probably explains that. But the numbers are back up. But we have eliminated 99.9%. We're down to that last 1%. And then you can see the cases that develop from the vaccine. There are a few of those, 1,100 in 2020, but only 342 so far this year. As a result of our worldwide campaign, along with, of course, the governments that have contributed money. Governments around the world have contributed over $19 billion. Rotarians have now contributed over $2.6 billion to the campaign. And as a result of all of that, 19.4 million people not paralyzed, more than 1.5 million that did not die as a result of having polio. I don't know if any of you or many of you have had a chance to look at your Rotary magazine for October 2020. Cassie's paper copy just arrived the other day. We were back in Missouri and Arkansas for a couple of things last week, and just picked up our mail yesterday. And there is a very lengthy story about the challenges that we're encountering and how we're overcoming the challenges. And in the edition, we saw it just this morning. We thought, take a picture and put this in the slideshow. This is a pie chart of where the money goes out of our $150 million that we raise each year. 50 million coming from Rotarians and 100 million coming from the Gates Foundation. And it's very interesting. We don't have time for me to run through all of the pieces of the pie, but you can see that raising awareness is the largest piece of the pie, and that's that's convincing people that they need to have their children vaccinated, and raising awareness in the countries where vaccination NIDs or others are taking place and being carried on. I have not had a chance to read the article, but I'm looking forward to taking a look at it later this afternoon. I think it'll be very interesting to read. I would encourage you to read it as well. So I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. So here we are, having spent nearly $20 billion around the world to try to eradicate polio, and we're down to that last 0.1%. And it all reminds me of Margaret Mead's quote, which I used in every talk I gave, I think, when I was district governor back in the Stone Age. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I've always thought that really tells you all you need to know about Rotarians. We're changing the world. We're making it a better place. We're making a difference. And we just can't give up now. So we need to keep raising that money and keep raising that awareness of all around us.